Spike the Spindly Spruce, dedicated to Artie. Happy Christmas. It was Christmas Eve, and Spike stood in the clearing of the forest, feeling lonely. All his friends had been carried off in triumph by smiling families to become Christmas trees. Each year, the excitement of the weeks before Christmas enveloped his forest home. Boys and girls would come with their mums and dads to choose their special tree. Each year, Spike, who was small and spindly, watched with envious eyes. No one wanted a little tree, because he was not tall and straight, and he did not have big bushy branches full of leaves. This Christmas he felt sadder than ever, as his very best friend, Alan, had been chosen. He felt very, very lonely. As the clock struck midnight, the church bells rang out in the cold, crisp air, heralding Christmas morning. Spike looked up at the stars sparkling in the dark sky above him. Suddenly he saw a green flash. A sparkling, glittering light seemed to shoot out of one of the stars and was falling to earth. He watched, fascinated by the myriad of shimmering lights. They came closer and closer. The clearing became filled with the green mist. In the centre appeared a dainty little creature with huge iridescent-coloured wings. She fluttered through the swirls of mist until she hovered in front of Spike. "Don't be sad," she said to Spike. "You live in this glorious forest where the squirrels love to frolic in your branches and the birds nest in your leaves. You thrive alongside woodland flowers and grasses. You turn your face to the warmth of the sun. You breathe clean air, and your roots are nourished by the soft, dark earth. You are free, little tree." "But I want the boys and girls to pick me. I want to be tall, straight and handsome. I want to be their special Christmas tree," said Spike, looking forlorn. The fairy shook her head sadly at him. "Do you want to see what happened to your best friend Alan?" she asked. Spike nodded, his branches trembling with excitement. "Very well," said the fairy. "For this Christmas, starting back when your friend was chosen, you can see what happens." The green mist seemed to grow thicker and thicker as the fairy waved her arms through its nebulous cloud before she disappeared. Spike was transported back in time. He saw his friend still in the forest, a full-grown blue spruce, tall with wide branches full of pine cones. A little girl and boy ran towards them. He watched as the children ran up to Alan and began jumping up and down in excitement. This is the one," they chorused, as their mummy and daddy came up behind them. The children joined hands and danced round Alan. 2 men came out of the forest, carrying a chainsaw. Spike had seen the men come every Christmas, but he had never known what they came for. The family moved back out of the way as the 2 men approached Alan. The most dreadful scream reverberated around the forest as the saw cut into Alan's trunk, making him cry out in pain. Spike looked on in horror, unable to help his friend. Spike couldn't understand how the family stood so calmly, watching the torture of their chosen tree. How could they not hear the screams? The chainsaw bit deeper and deeper until poor Alan fell over. The 2 men heaved him up on their shoulders, took him to the family's car where he was strapped onto the roof. The ropes broke some of his branches. Spike could see that sheer fright was making his leaves tremble. Spike found himself magically transported to the inside of the family home. Alan was propped up in a bright red bucket, while the children's father balanced the tree with hard stones around the base to keep him stable. Spike watched as the children brought out boxes of silver baubles, glass ornaments, coloured lights and tinsel. They draped them all over Alan, hiding his natural beauty under a veil of glitter. As the days passed, people came in and out making a lot of noise, eating and drinking and putting strange boxes at Alan's feet. Spike could only stand and watch anxiously. He was afraid for his friend, who was desperately thirsty. No one had thought to give the Christmas tree a drink of water, and his leaves were beginning to drop. The mother moaned at the tree as she tried to clear up his leaves. Finally, the strange boxes were all opened, the people disappeared, and the children were getting ready to go back to school. Alan was withered now. He had hardly any of his leaves, and his pine cones were all gone. Spike saw him being dragged outside and left on the pavement for the recycling man. He would be chopped into little pieces and sold for firewood. As the recycle lorry approached, Spike found himself back in the clearing of the forest. He felt the soft earth at his roots. He drank a deep draught of the soft rainwater running down his leaves. and listened to the wind in the willows running along the river bank. Spike realised the dainty fairy had been right. His forest home was beautiful, and he was happy here. This was far more important than being chosen for his appearance, then neglected and finally abandoned. The following Christmas, Spike did not feel envious when the other trees were chosen. Instead, he felt sad when he heard the sound of the chainsaw reverberating through the forest. He tried to shrink away so he would not be chosen. As time passed, Spike became more and more content with his role in the forest, becoming at one with the wildlife and the environment. And his inner happiness began to show on the outside. Spike would never be tall, but he began to blossom, and the blue-green of his leaves was a delight to behold. He had become a handsome spruce. One Christmas, a young couple came to the forest, looking for a tree for their new home. They looked and looked, but Spike could hear them saying that all the trees seemed too tall or too heavy. Finally they came to his clearing, and his worst fears came true. They chose him. Tears sparkled like fairy lights on the tips of his branches. He waited for the chainsaw men. Saw them walking down the track. He could hear all the noises of the forest, the pine cones falling, the rustle of the deer, the scuttle of tiny feet in the undergrowth, and most of all the haunting evensong of the birds. He said goodbye and closed his eyes, waiting for the pain to strike. Time passed and nothing happened. He opened his eyes and saw the two men with the chainsaw. They were talking to the young couple, who were shaking their heads emphatically. The couple had driven close to the clearing. Spike could see their tiny red car with a trailer at the back. The couple went back to the trailer and returned with 2 spades. Was this some new torture? The couple began digging around Spike's roots. "Careful you don't hurt his roots," said the young woman. Spike looked at her in astonishment. Why should she care? Gradually and gently, the couple dug out all of Spike's roots and very carefully carried him to the trailer. There were no ropes to break his branches, and he was gently wrapped in damp sacking to keep him comfortable. Once they reached the couple's new home, Spike saw in front of the house there was a deep, dark and nourishing hole. It was dug in the centre of the garden. He was lifted with care from the trailer and placed in the hole. The young man poured buckets of water onto his roots before adding more soft earth to give Spike support until his roots could attach themselves to their new home. The young woman wound a string of fairy lights around the garden, floodlighting Spike in all his natural beauty. "You will always be our special Christmas tree," she told him. As she went inside, a little robin flew up and perched on one of Spike's branches. Spike felt he was about to make a new friend. The end.